All right, so I thought that was an outstanding video, and based on what I saw in the chats, apparently you guys did too. So Chrissy or whoever it is that sent out the link, thank you so much. To give you an idea of what happens during one of these trainings is, and I don't know how it's going to be done on Zoom, but I don't think it'll be that different. The facilitator, someone from the EMD, is going to introduce the program, and then they're going to ask what people do. What skills do you have? What kind of background do you have? And for those that want to share, then we all share. And that way, just like in the video, when the gentleman said, when the firefighter said, you'd be surprised at how many people you have in your neighborhood that are that have a variety of different skills. And so you go through and you talk to everybody there and you find out what skill sets folks have. And then you find out what kind of resources you all have available. So maybe somebody has a generator, then that can go to either the gathering site or the comfort site. You can find out who has ladders, who has chainsaws, all those things. And more importantly, you find out what homes need help. Like I would have found out that my neighbors, Wally and Mary Ellen, were older and needed assistance. Perhaps you have families that have young kids and they're going to need assistance. One of our neighbors had a whole back room filled with different types of animals in cages, and they really needed help to get everything loaded up. You find this out, and whether or not the people are there, the folks that do come, they can say, oh yeah, 3 houses down, Sally and Bob have blah, blah, blah. So it really, really helps you define who it is that you have living near you and what they can bring to the table as far as helping and what they can, what they need if there's a disaster. Now, one of the issues that I found with a lot of neighborhoods is they'll say, oh, we've got a firefighter here, or so-and-so is a doctor. Well, know what? Guess what? During the disaster, they may not be there. So you can never rely on one person. So you want to have as many people in your neighborhood trained as is possible. Well, one of the other things that you're going to do is you will be figuring out whose home or what location you guys can all go meet at. And that could be a home, it could be a park at the end of the street. It doesn't really matter, but you want to make sure that everybody has that written down so that after the disaster, after you go through and make sure your family is safe, that you can all go there. You'll also designate a care center or a comfort center where people can go for more emotional support, where they can all meet and talk. And it's not so much the teams will be going out, the medical teams or the disaster assessment teams. It's more, let's all meet here and chat and comfort one another and make sure that everything's okay. All right. Now, one of the things that I wanted to mention when he talked about shutting off the utilities. Okay, we know that shutting off the gas is important, and many of you probably have automatic gas shutoffs, which is great. But once you turn that thing off, you cannot turn it back on. So either the gas company has to do that or a certified plumber. But you want to make sure that when you're turning that off, that there's a very good reason to do so. What he didn't talk about is turning off the electrical panel. Now, here's a question for you. How do you turn off your electrical panel? Do you know where your electrical panel is? And a lot of people don't. In fact, a lot of people don't even know where their gas shutoff is or their water shutoff. And this is going to be a challenge for you. Tomorrow, after you get home from work or before you go to work or whatever, figure out where all those things are, because that's key to this thing. You can't turn off the gas if you don't know where it is. You can't turn off the gas unless you have a proper device to turn it off with. And that would be a large crescent wrench. Better than the little tool, but a large crescent wrench is a really great idea. And you attach it to your gas pipe. You attach it with a twist tie, not a zip tie, because a zip tie, unless you have scissors, you're not going to be able to get that baby off. A twist tie, you just take it off and you can use it. With the electrical panel, if you turn off your electricity, you turn it off individual breakers at a time, and then you turn off the main. That way you don't cause a power surge either way. When you turn it back on, you do it the opposite. You put the main on and then the individual breakers. Very important that you understand that's the way that it's done. Well, why would you turn off the water? You know, he mentioned capturing the water in your home. That's a big, big deal. But probably more important is the fact that our sewer lines and our water lines are pretty close. And if there's a break, you could contaminate all the water you have in your home with sewage. Yeah, that's not good. Thankfully, the water turnoff at your home, not at the street, but at your home, is a very simple lever to turn. And you're going to want to shut that water off ASAP. They talked about having your fire extinguisher. Where do you keep your fire extinguisher, and how many do you have? Well, you should have at least a couple. And undoubtedly, all of you have a fire extinguisher that's in your kitchen. Well, let me ask you, is it under the sink? Because that's where most people put theirs. But maybe that's not the best place. Now, if I were to spin my camera around, you would see that I'm sitting outside of where my kitchen is. If I walked by and I said there was a fire on my stove, I would have to cross that fire to get to the fire extinguisher under my sink. And that's not going to work. So we take the fire extinguishers and we place them outside the kitchen so they are rapidly accessible in case you need to use it. All right. Now, funny story. Okay, I know how to use a fire extinguisher. The other day, well, maybe a couple weeks ago, I decided I wanted to light a fire in our fireplace. You know, I shouldn't even tell you this because I'm going to lose all credibility once I do this, but that's all right. Hang with me. I started a fire in a little box, which is how we start our fires, and I didn't realize that the flue to the fireplace was shut. And I said, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to turn this, I'm going to have to get rid of this fire. And I didn't want to use a fire extinguisher, so I picked up the box and I took it outside. That's all good, but as I moved it through the house and the garage outside, it got a little more air, and as you know, air with fire creates more flame, so I threw it onto the patio and I grabbed the hose. And I know how to use a fire extinguisher, and I know that you spray it across the bottom of the fire, but I didn't. I sprayed it across the top and I created 5 more fires. Now, thankfully, it was a little drizzly, so it wasn't a big issue, but you guys, it's important to practice. So, and I was a battalion coordinator. I know how to do this stuff. So anyway, it's important that you understand how to use that fire extinguisher. It gets placed out on the curb, so if there's a small fire, everybody can grab those fire extinguishers and put it out. I'm not going to go through the rest of it, but it's really important that each one of you adopt this neighborhood teams program and take it as a personal challenge for you to get your neighborhood through the RYLAN or the Map Your Neighborhood program, because it really is a godsend. And when he said the best thing about it is meeting your neighbors, I did one event where we chatted with everybody, and it was in person. It was a couple years ago. And these 2 women who lived next door to each other for 25 years had never spoken. And when they found out that they had a lot in common, they talked the whole time. To me, it was the best meeting ever, because these ladies now have a terrific bond, and it was all because of Map Your Neighborhood. So I strongly, strongly encourage you guys to do that, okay? Well, the next part of our presentation is, what about you and your preparedness? And I think many of you are probably quite prepared, but what I found out after watching Patrick's meeting last month was a lot of people aren't, and this is kind of a scary topic. So I'm going to go through a couple areas, and I want you to pay attention. If you already know, then fantastic, but maybe you'll pick up a nugget or 2 that you weren't aware of, and it's a big deal. Now, we already talked about earthquake, wildfire, high wind events, but the bottom one, personal financial disasters. Okay, we had a lot of people in this country who had lost their jobs, and especially earlier in the year when some of those stimulus checks didn't make it through, or they didn't get their unemployment, or for whatever reason. Personal disasters are just as big of an issue as all the others. They can cause the same type of problems for a person, maybe not structurally for a home, of course, but they're a big deal too. So all of this pertains to personal financial issues, as well as things like earthquakes and wildfires. So the spectrum of disasters really starts with the baseline, which is your normal daily life. Now, I know plenty of people, just that is a disaster. That may be you, that may be me, but it makes its way all the way to a full collapse of services. But what it oftentimes looks like is limited access to goods and services. And here's one of the things that I want you to think about. Again, with this pandemic, we really got to see a lot of this. We had limited access to stores because many of them weren't open, or they had specific hours and we had to wait in line. And maybe now you still have to wait in line. That's limited access to goods and services. Voluntary rationing of utilities and food. If you were one of those folks who didn't have enough toilet paper, and you're like, holy cow, everybody's out and we're down to 1 pack, and you tell your family, okay, everybody, 2 squares, that's it. That's voluntary rationing of goods and services. Well, then there's involuntary rationing, and I think we're seeing that now. If you go to buy toilet paper, I'm pretty sure you can only buy like 2 packs at a time, right? Or you can go to the market, and I haven't seen this recently, but they were limiting you to 2 packages of meat. So that's involuntary rationing. And then partial collapse of services, we had that last night. We had our power go out. Now we still had water and we still had gas, but that's a partial collapse of services. In the event of an earthquake, we could have full collapse of services. So how are you prepared to deal with all of those? Because those could hit us at any given time. Well, you guys remember back when, it wasn't that long ago, you'd buy your 72-hour kit and that was enough. It was like, oh, you just need to be prepared for 3 days. And then kind of pushed it up to a week. And then it was 2 weeks. And well, now, it's a month or more. And that becomes overwhelming for folks. But I really strongly encourage you just to take it one step at a time. And when you go to the market, pick up a couple extra things. It doesn't have to be this massive endeavor, but I would encourage you to make sure that you're doing it on your own. And we're going to talk a little bit about food and stuff, but when you buy those kits, there's a problem with that because then you don't know what's in there. And if you are actually putting together your own kit, your own preparedness, you're buying what your family needs and what you're familiar with, and there's no surprises. But now here's another one. How many people are you actually preparing for? And my husband and I have a guest. We have a house guest. And if something happens, we just reduce the amount of food and supplies that we have by 50% because we added one more person. Or if you have neighbors who possibly haven't been prepared, will you be able to step in and help them? These are questions you're going to need to ask yourself. But I would strongly encourage you to look at the 1 to 3 month period, possibly even 6 months of supplies. And 6 months of supplies is not that much. When we talk about preparedness, oftentimes we talk about the physical aspect. And we will go through that, but there's more to it than that. There's the mental aspect, there's the training, the procedures, that's what CERT's for. There's the emotional aspect, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But let's start with the physical side. And here I have shelter, hygiene, water, food. Maybe not quite in that order, but if you've ever heard of the 3s of survival, 3 minutes without air, you're dead. 3 days without shelter, 3 hours without shelter, not good. Not so much here in LA, but in other places, or if you're up in the snow or something, shelter is super important. 3 days without water, not going to happen. 30 days without food. Now notice 30 days without food. That is almost unimaginable for most folks. But the reality is you don't have to eat all the time. In fact, I'm sure many of you have done periodic fasts. It's not as terrible as it may sound. So food is not really top of the list. But when we talk about shelter, most of the time you're not going to have to leave your house, with the exception of a massive earthquake or a tornado or possibly a hurricane, which I hope we don't see either of those last two. You'll be able to stay in your home, which is really good because that's where all your stuff is. The idea that you're going to bug out to the hills, not so much in LA. In fact, not at all. In case of an earthquake, chances are roads will be down. Plus, do you have some kind of a carrier that if you were going to bug out up the crest, that you'd be able to get up there? Probably not either. For me, I've got my supplies all over the house. Why? Because I don't know if one part of the house is going to collapse or not. And I don't want to have all my stuff in the garage and then find out that I can't access it. So that's important to know. Now, during the Northridge earthquake, which we all remember, I'm sure, did you know that there were thousands of people that lived in Balboa Park for up to 2 months after the earthquake? Balboa Park, that is amazing. Well, if you're going to have to do that, if you cannot live in your home, an alternative shelter such as a large family style tent that looks just like this is actually a really good option, because for many of those you can actually stand up in them and they're not as horrible as you might think. Now, they are not portable at all. They're big and they're heavy and they're not something that you're going to just like run out with. This is something that you are going to take probably a couple of folks to put together, but they work pretty well, especially if you have to live in them for more than a couple of days. Now, most of people, when we talk about shelters, they think that these little tents, these little dome tents are fine, and they are. I used to do a ton of backpacking and I would spend 1 to 2 weeks in those things, and they're fine, but they have their limitations. But they're inexpensive. They can be anywhere from $50 up to $1,000. That's not inexpensive, but you can get all kinds of quality. They can be guyed out to withstand all kinds of winds, like even the winds yesterday, unlike those big tents that I just showed a moment ago. But they're great for short term. So not a bad idea to have those in your supplies. Now, I'm going to talk about water before we get to hygiene. Water, we all know, a gallon a person, per pet, per day. Well, a lot of times people think, I don't drink a gallon of water a day. Well, when you're in a disaster situation, you very well may. So we always want to make sure that that's the very minimum that we have, but then we have to add 1 to 2 gallons of water for hygiene and cooking. Well, here is where I think there's a little bit of a disconnect. When people go to the market and buy water, they usually buy either gallon containers or they buy the flats of bottled water, but you don't need that for everything. You just need that really for the drinking. The other water you can put in containers just from the tap. Now you'll have to change it out periodically unless you want to put in additives, but it's perfectly acceptable and really cheap to do. So if, let's say, I've got a vinegar bottle or I've got a bleach bottle, I can clean those out and put water in there, and that water can be used for hygiene. It can be used for a variety of different things. It doesn't have to be used for water. One of the other things I see with folks is they get a certain sense of complacency if they have those big 55-gallon barrels, which are fantastic. And I would strongly encourage everybody to have one if you can. But you can't take that water with you because that's like 800 pounds. So things like a variety of different size containers, like the small bottles for transport, the big one as your main source of water, and then 5-gallon containers, because in the event of a situation where our water has been cut off, the government has been known to send out what's called water buffalo trucks, and those are the easiest ones to fill. So a variety of containers that you keep throughout your house, really important. Now, if you have something like big plastic barrels, or if you have the 1-gallon containers, do not put those on the concrete in your garage. The reason for that is during the summer when it gets hot, the plastic and the concrete can actually transport contaminants into the water. And now your water is useless for anything other than hygiene, as long as you're careful, or flushing the toilet. So bottom line on this one is, don't think you have to go out and buy all this water. You've got access to it. You just have to have the right containers. And don't hesitate to use a variety of different ones. That's perfectly okay. Now, water filtration, this one's pretty important, because if we have a situation with our water system where we're still able to get it, but we're not so sure about the quality, you're going to want to filter it. There's a big difference between filtration and purification. If you get a portable water filter that you use backpacking, those are usually again, filters. And what that means is they have a 0.2 micron, which is really small, 0.2 micron filtering medium. And it takes out bacterias, it takes out protozoas, it takes out all the things that we have around here. Super effective. If there's a challenge with things like viruses, you're really going to need a purifier. And purifiers usually are not, they're usually not physical, mechanical, they're more chemical, but they do have a much tinier filtration rate, but they add the chemicals to get the viruses. All right. And so, you know, there's the Hep A's, the rotavirus, all the other viruses, probably even including the one that we're so familiar with now. Now, pre-filtering is really important, and a bandana or a t-shirt is great for this. And what that is that you got water that's kind of dirty, you run it through your bandana or your t-shirt, and it takes out all the big chunks. So things like, you know, small pebbles or twigs or leaves, and then you filter it through your filter and or your purifier. But a bandana or a t-shirt cannot take out viruses or bacteria or anything like that. Okay. Sanitation. Oh, here's something that most people don't think about, and we don't talk about it. We talk about water and we talk about all that other stuff, but we do not talk about sanitation. And here's a little story for you. Oh gosh, I think it's like 15 years ago when Argentina had a big financial collapse. It was a devastating situation because people had nothing. They were stuck in their homes, and this gentleman wrote a book about it, and he was very prepared. He had everything taken care of, but what he didn't do is he didn't talk to his neighbor, and his neighbor was not prepared. They had a sewage issue where the neighbor's sewage flowed into his yard, and his daughter died from it, died from the exposure to that sewage. Even though he had taken care of everything, the sewage was not taken care of. And this is something I cannot emphasize enough, because this will kill you. And this is bad. So contractor bags, they're like plastic bags, but they're much, much thicker. They're called contractor bags, and you can use them in toilets if you're staying in your home, or you can use them in 5-gallon buckets. And they sell them now with toilet seats and lids, which is fantastic. Or you can just go out and get a 5-gallon bucket and use a pool noodle. Seriously, it doesn't have to, you don't have to spend a ton of money on this stuff. Toilet paper and wipes, not Kleenex. Here's something you may not know, and I'm going to talk about it again a little bit later, but Kleenex does not break down in toilets. So do not use that if you're running out of toilet paper, because you're going to end up clogging up the system. Toilet paper and wipes are great. Kitty litter. Kitty litter absorbs all the liquid. It's really good. It's good for all of it. For those of you that have cats, you know how that works. Bleach, liquid or dry. If you have bleach in your supplies, please know that it's only good for 6 months. After 6 months, it loses a lot of its effectiveness. Dry bleach is a little bit better. In fact, it's a lot better. It's just a little bit harder to store. RV toilet supplies. And they got this stuff nailed. They know how to do this. So if you go to Camping World and talk to them, they'll be able to outfit you completely. 35-gallon trash can with a tight-fitting lid. And on there, it shows an aluminum one, and that's the one I would recommend. That's where the contractor bags go, because you've got to have a place to store this stuff. It can't just sit there. All right. And again, nobody ever talks about it, but man, it's important. Was anybody surprised when, again, around March or so, everybody started talking about make sure you wash your hands? Doesn't everybody? I guess not, because they thought it was super important to tell everyone. Being clean, though, is the best way to not get things like infections. And as you know, an infection, again, can kill you. Soap and water, hydrogen peroxide, all these things. For any of you who've ever gone backpacking or camping, dry shampoo and waterless soap are wonderful. I'm sure we all have a big supply of hand sanitizer now, different kinds of wipes, and vinegar is actually really good for disinfecting also. Okay, food. I think most of us know how to put away food for our emergency supplies, but there's a couple things that you may or may not have thought of. Canned food is usually better if you don't have to haul it around with you because it doesn't require any cooking. The best meal I ever had my entire life, and I've been to some really nice restaurants, was after a day of rock climbing up in the Sierras, taking a cold can of chili. I don't even think it was good chili. It was like just Denison's or something, opening that up and eating it directly out of the can. And it was the best meal I've ever had in my life. I was really hungry, apparently. But it doesn't require any cooking. It already has liquid in it. It has a long shelf life, way longer than the expiration dates, by the way. As long as it's kept in a cool, dry place and there's no disfiguration in the can, you can keep that baby for like 5 years after the expiration. Those expirations are not hard and fast at all. I would tell you, though, if there's no refrigeration available, buy small cans, not big ones, because you won't have any way to keep the leftovers if that's a situation. Now, dry food and freeze-dried food, this is what most people buy. And it's fantastic, you know, because it's right there. It comes in a container, great variety. I mean, I've used a ton of this backpacking for sure. Compact, lightweight, you can take it with you, super long shelf life, like 25 years. But here's the challenge. For most of it, you need to cook it, which takes energy, and you need water. And that water is key. All right, so just kind of keep in mind. Rice and beans. Okay, who was surprised in March, February, when you went to the store and the rice and beans were gone? Absolutely wiped out, along with flour and yeast. I guess everybody becomes a baker in, in a disaster. I had no idea. But yeah, rice and beans are fantastic. But here's the thing. When you are in a situation where you have to minimize the amount of energy that you use, you want to make sure you soak them, both rice and both beans, because it minimizes the amount of cooking necessary besides improving digestibility. Who knew you were going to get a little nutrition here too, right? All right, now here's my epiphany. I've got a freezer in the garage, and for as long as I've had it, it's been stocked full of different meat and all kinds of stuff. And then I realized I have all this raw meat, I have big roasts, I got all this stuff in there. If I need to use it, I'm going to have to cook it, and it's going to take a while. Or worse yet, if I lose power and I don't have the ability to get that freezer up and running, I'm going to have like a big, huge party, and we're going to have to cook all of it, and it's going to take some time. So I've changed my philosophy on that. And now all that raw food that I had in the freezer is now cooked. And so I've got bags of cooked meat. I've got bags of cooked rice. I've got bags of cooked or blanched vegetables, all kinds of grains and things, so that in the event that I need to use that, I pull it out. I don't have to utilize a lot of energy to cook it. It's already cooked. All I have to do really is warm it. Much faster. And also the fact that I don't have to worry about it if I don't have anything in the refrigerator in the house. I just go out there, grab something, I'm good to go, as long as I replace it. So now my freezer is full of pre-cooked foods that need very little work should I have to access it. So I think that one's really good. Take a note. Here's some miscellaneous things, and I'm going to hit one that I just think is brilliant, and I didn't come up with it. Okay, peanut butter, nut butters, great for calorie density, and they're comfort foods for most people. Spices, condiments, you can do so much with those. Condiments, I would use the single packet, again, because if you have a refrigeration issue, then you don't have to worry about it. Candy, cookie, granola bars. Okay, this is not the time for you to go on a healthy diet. You want to have comfort food because you're going to be stressed. Now, you shouldn't be eating it, 24/7, but access to it, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Coffee and tea. We all want a coffee in the morning. Okay, I found out something really interesting the other day. Did you know it takes 1,200 watts to start a coffee maker? That's a lot of wattage. I found that out because of our generator. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a ton. Well, I'm sure you've heard of cold brew coffee, right? You pay like 3 times more for it if you go to Starbucks. Super simple to make. It's just like sun tea. You just soak it and then it's good to go. It's really good. You should try it. And again, takes less energy. Cooking oil. You're going to need cooking oil if you're going to have to cook something. Multivitamins, because most of the food that you're going to be eating, you're not going to get the same nutritional value that you get normally when you go to the store. Here's the kicker. Seeds for sprouting. Unless you have a garden, you're not going to have access to fresh vegetables if this is a longer term situation. But if you take something like peas or beans and you sprout those, you now have incredibly nutritionally dense food that's fresh and crunchy. I think that one is just like an all-star move. And then alcohol. If you drink, a bottle of wine is going to be your best friend. If you don't drink, a bottle of wine is going to be somebody else's best friend and a great bartering tool. Something to think about. I bought a whole case of, okay, don't laugh, $2 Chuck. It's sitting in my back room and I plan on using that for bartering, maybe drinking. But a whole case, my husband couldn't believe it when I walked in with the whole thing. He's like, what are you thinking? I said, hey, it's part of our supplies. So there you are. All right, energy sources. All right, so if you lived in the valley and you lost your power last night, we were out for about 4 hours. I was getting ready to start the generator. Important to note that if you want to buy a generator, make sure it's at least twice, it has the ability to crank at least twice as much as what your appliance is. And so for most freezers, that's like 1100 watts. So you need at least a 2200 watt generator to actually start that freezer, and then it takes less to run it. Important to know. There's different types of generators. They use gas, they use propane, they use natural gas, there's solar, whatever works for you. We've got a regular gas one, and we have a couple of gas cans, but we also always keep our cars full, and we have the ability to siphon the gas out of the cars into the generator. One thing to note, when you use an extension cord, that really reduces the wattage. So you want to try to keep that as close as possible or use as thick of an extension cord as possible. Also, you never bring the generator inside, ever, ever, never. All right, so something to think about. You may end up moving your fridge or your freezer closer to the generator if that's an issue. Outdoor grill, yay, what a great time to have a barbecue. Charcoal, propane, again, just make sure you've got it available. Never, ever bring it inside, no matter what. Then there's solar ovens, which we're going to talk about just for a second, rocket stoves, and sterno cans. Okay, sterno cans are the only way that you can cook indoors safely if you don't use generated power from something else. For us, all of our neighbors don't have generators, so we share. So when they come with, well, they don't come with wheels, but we put ours on a wheel kit. So we use ours for the amount of time we need to keep our freezer and fridge up and running. And then we take it to somebody else and they use it for a couple more hours. And so we share the responsibility for gas and batteries to run it. Something that most people don't know is you don't need to keep that fridge and freezer plugged in all the time. Just a couple of hours, 4 hours a day, and you should be good to go. But you want to make sure you insulate it with blankets and anything else and really minimize opening that. So you only open it when it's attached, you pull out what you need, and then you don't access it again. Also, a full fridge and a full freezer stays way colder. So if you don't have a lot of food in there, fill up some of those water bottles and stick them in there. So not only is your water in there, but now it's ice and it's keeping everything cold as possible. Solar ovens. These things are like the best kept secret. You use the sun to cook, and I'll let you research it on your own, but literally you can take a pot that has a black interior and put a bunch of tin foil around it, and you can make a solar oven. First time I heard about these, I had a Subaru Outback, and don't laugh, it was one of those 100-degree days. So I took a bunch of brownie mix. I made brownies and I baked them in my car, and it worked out great. Then I thought I would dehydrate some figs. So I took some figs from our tree, I cut them up, I stuck them in there, and they dehydrated really well, but I want them just a little bit drier. So I left them in there one more, I don't know, about a day. And unfortunately, the ants found them and it was terrible. So don't do that. That doesn't work out well. But solar ovens are fantastic. They take no energy whatsoever, and they're amazing. Next is a rocket stove. Okay, if you filtered your water through your bandana and you pulled out all those little twigs, you take those twigs and you stick them into a rocket stove, and it's the most effective and efficient way to generate cooking heat outdoors than anything else out there. And they are made in a variety of different ways, and they're super simple. It is literally a horizontal tube that meets a vertical tube. You stuff your twigs in there and you light it up, and the air from the vertical tube creates a fire. And as you can see, you can make them with bricks, you can make them with tin cans, you can even drill them out of a stump of wood. Amazing. Check out rocket stoves. Another thing that people don't think about oftentimes is entertainment. If you are stuck in a situation where you're at home and you're not going anywhere, it's important to have things like board games and cards and a sitar. Everyone needs a sitar, right? So there you go. That'll make your day. CDs and DVDs, if you have the players, I know everybody's like, oh, we do MP3. Well, if you don't have internet, you're probably not going to have that. So CDs, DVDs, and DVD players, fantastic. And make sure again that you've got things like solar chargers and all that to make sure you charge them up. And musical instruments, if you're really good at it. Otherwise, people will want to kill you if you're trying to play the guitar and you suck. All right, home security. Make sure all your doors and windows and outdoor gates are locked and you have good locks on them. Things happen when society breaks down, and it doesn't take much. And there's a saying that says, might is right. And you can prepare all you want and somebody can come along and take it from you. And we'll talk just a little tiny bit about that, but you want to make sure that you can lock all your doors and windows. Pieces of doweling into the tracks of your windows and or your sliding doors, fantastic. 2x4s across inward facing doors. So if you have French doors that you pull open, if you put brackets on the external outside those doors on your wall and then lay a 2x4, you can't open the door. Super easy, inexpensive, effective way to keep those doors from opening. Outdoor lighting, fantastic. Dogs, yes. Protection, okay. This is, for those of you who are inclined, how many weapons were sold in this country? Some crazy number over the last several months. If you have a weapon and you don't know how to use it, go ahead and lock it and throw away the key, because I do not want you picking up that weapon ever. We have been blessed to work with a company, First and 10th Tactical, and they've done, I think, 10 classes for us over the last couple months, and they are amazing. If you have a weapon or you are thinking of getting one, or if you haven't used it much, get the training. January 31st, Justin is going to be doing a beginning and intermediate pistol with an intro to home defense, which is what most people buy these weapons for. Patrick has taken many of these classes. Christy is a instructor. This is a perishable skill. So if you've ever taken a class, but you haven't taken one recently, you need to take some. This is a great one to take. February 13th, we're doing neighborhood vehicle entry control. We talked about this at Patrick's last meeting last month. This is how you keep your neighborhood safe and keep people from coming in that you don't want in. And then on February 26th, we'll be doing the full home defense class. And this is going to be opening doors, coming around corners, trying to clear the room to make sure your family's safe, how to fire so that you don't hit anybody that you don't want to. These courses are amazing. And Justin usually charges $250 for each class. They're 6 hours. But because he knew that you guys were going to suffer through listening to me, he's giving you a discount. So, so it's $150 to $175, depending on the course. They're 6 hours long and pretty darn amazing. So I, again, strongly encourage you, if you want to go that route, take the training and keep taking the training, because it's, again, a perishable skill. All right, mental preparedness. This is where CERT comes in. There's theory and then there's practice. You got to know what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. And this is where we all fall down. You can have the best preparedness kit, but if you don't know how to use it, then it does no good. Again, I will use myself as an example. I had a Princeton Tech lantern that I had gotten, and I decided to use it last night when I needed it. But I didn't know how it, God, you're going to think I'm an idiot. I didn't know how to turn it on. So I put in the batteries in, and I'm thinking I'm turning it on, but I'm really not. And I'm like, this thing's horrible. No, it was great. I was horrible because I'd never used it before. Don't be that person. You need to practice with what you've got in a variety of ways. For example, how many of you have radios, but you don't practice with them? Or you have a radio, but you don't have a license? Buy and learn how to use a radio. Patrick does these classes every fourth Wednesday of the month that you practice radio with an app called Zello. You need to do this stuff. Get ham licensed or GMRS, get your GMRS license. We're going to be doing a ham licensing course probably in the next month or so with Ruzi Mowberry, who is just like the top guy when it comes to communications. And he gets everybody through. He got me through. And believe me, I praise him up and down because I didn't think that was going to happen. Learn how to relay with your neighbors. It's kind of like the game telephone, right? Where you tell one person one thing and he tells another person, but you got to make sure that message doesn't change. And you only learn how to do that through practice. Another thing to practice is water rationing. All right. I'm not even sure how to go through this. This is where maybe I go off the edge a little bit, but I think this is really important. If you know that you're about to lose water, a lot of times you can actually store a whole bunch of it in your washing machine if it's a top loader, and use that. This is a great way to teach your family how to be more careful with the amount of water that you have. I was raised by a dad who was in the Navy, and he taught me to do Navy showers, which means get wet, get soap, turn off the water, get soapy, turn the water back on, rinse off, and get out. Now, I've forgotten some of that, and maybe my showers are a little longer these days, but when you don't have access to a lot of water, this is really great. So learn how to use however much water you have, but use it judiciously. Use water twice. So if you are taking a shower, if you have a sun shower, or you're doing a sponge bath, use that second water to flush the toilet. Just pour it in and you flush the toilet. And that's really good. Practice filtering water for drinking. Whether you actually have to filter it or not, go through the mechanics so you know what it's like. And then learn how to rinse clothes in secondary water and hang them to dry if you need to do this. Now, this might be more than you'll ever have to need, but wouldn't it be nice to know that you can, just in case? Rationing of utilities. A lot of my perspective on this is that we're stewards of this earth. And I think that we should be careful about how we utilize our utilities. So things like making sure that okay, for the next 2 hours, we're going to have access to the utilities, and we're going to pretend we don't. Well, then you fully charge all your electronics. You get solar power chargers. Those little Patriot chargers, they're amazing. Optimize light in one room. We did that last night. We utilized just one room. We made sure that it was well lit. And there's things like taking a flashlight and shining it up on your roof, on your ceiling. If you have a white ceiling, it really illuminates the entire room. There's all kinds of little tricks that you can learn how to do with using less of things like water and utilities. Here's my favorite. If any of you have ever gone backpacking, you know you're off the grid when you go backpacking. Backpacking is the #1 way to teach yourself how to do all this stuff. But if you don't want to go backpacking, just go off grid for 24 hours. Turn off your electricity and don't use the water and see how well you do. And if you have kids, they'll probably scream because this means no cell phone use, but learn how to use alternate methods of cooking. Go ahead and have a barbecue out there, or use a solar oven, or however you're going to cook. Cold brew some coffee and tea. Use that stuff that you've got put away, right? 24 hours is not a long time, but it includes daytime and nighttime. And you'll be shocked what happens when you have to figure out how to do stuff in the dark and you only have a certain amount of light. I would strongly recommend you doing this as a voluntary thing before it's an involuntary thing. And no cell phones. And that's where your kids are going to scream. That's where I'm going to scream. Oh my God, I can't use my cell phone. It's all right. You'll get over it. I've got a sitar though. Okay, multiple use. Toilet paper is Kleenex. Okay. During the toilet paper shortage, I bet a bunch of people bought Kleenex thinking that that would be the same thing. It's not. A friend of mine works for the Department of Sanitation, and he said that is horrible. It's not made the same way. It doesn't break down, causes blockages, so don't do that. But you can use toilet paper as Kleenex. Salt, baking soda, and vinegar, oh my goodness. They are like the holy grail of multi-use components. I would say probably at least 10 or 15% of my entire supplies are salt, baking soda, and vinegar because they do so much. You want to make sure you can do the most with the least amount that you have. Okay, here's where I'm going to get a little bit weirder than I already am. Again, I think that we are stewards of this earth. And if you're, let's say, not a vegan, then got to respect the animals that we eat. If you are a vegan, plug your ears because we're talking about chicken. If you cook a chicken, use all of it. But here's the part that I want to talk about. Take the skin off. You can now have pork rinds. Take the bones and you can make stock, which you all do. I know that. But then do it again. Make a second pot, and the bones are soft at that point. You can grind them up and use them as pet food. It's pretty amazing. You're probably wondering, why am I talking to you about this? Because if you don't have access to the market and you got a chicken, you want to use that whole chicken. I'm not being like crazy. I'm being practical because not long ago, we didn't have access to everything that we wanted. And if you've noticed, when you go to the market these days, the shelves are no longer full. We could have a break in our supply chain and it wouldn't take much. It could be a natural disaster that breaks the five, or it could be a variety of other things. You need to learn how to use everything that you've got. Okay, emotional preparedness. Leadership, positive attitude, teamwork, and gratitude. Okay, when you go through the CERT program, or you go through the neighborhood watch program, or the neighborhood team program, what you are doing is learning how to be a leader. And in a disaster, leadership is crucial because most people aren't leaders. And I'm not talking about somebody that's barking orders. I'm talking about somebody who's confident, who is caring, who presents themselves as somebody that other people want to follow. And I got to tell you, there's probably a pretty huge lack of leadership just in general. Be the person that steps up, and you will be that person by attending these courses like you're doing right now, by taking the CERT class if you hadn't, by staying engaged, by being competent. But leadership becomes incredibly important when things break down. You know, when we started this, I said the three thing, right? 3 minutes without air and 3 days without water and all of that. Well, actually, the #1 survival tool is a positive attitude. And there's a picture, I think the next one here. Yeah, nothing has any meaning but the meaning I give it. Okay, Tony Robbins says this, but so many other people say it. That picture is what's called stone soup. And some of you may have read that story. And it was a book written by a gentleman who was at Auschwitz, and he was a survivor. And one of the things that was very poignant was that the people that survived were able to look at all the situations and put a positive spin on it. And stone soup is something that many of them ate which was basically water with rocks. Yeah, think about that. But if someone were to say, oh my goodness, this is fantastic, it's stone soup again. Oh, I can savor every nuance of all the spices, right? They were talking themselves into a better situation than they were in. A positive mental attitude is huge, just in life, yes, but especially when things go south. So I strongly, strongly encourage you to try to find ways to always look at the positive side of things, not Pollyanna. I don't want that. I don't want hopium, but how do you find the benefit from the situation that you're in? Many of you are probably very familiar with this woman. Hoping for the best, prepared for the worst, and unsurprised by anything in between. I think that pretty much sums it all up, right? We always want things to go well, but many times they don't. And as long as we're ready for it, anything in between, no consequence. And that's really, I think, the way we should live our lives. Now, neighborhoods that are prepared and work together recover far more quickly from disasters than those who don't. Okay, Dr. Lucy Jones was out here a couple of years ago, and many of you may have gone to her talk out in Granada Hills. I think Bill Hopkins put that together. And this was like the last thing she said. Neighborhoods that are prepared and work together recover far more quickly from disasters than those that don't. This disaster, whatever it is just around the corner. We don't know what it is or when it's coming, but be part of the reason that your neighborhood recovers, and don't be the person that keeps your neighborhood from recovering. You're here for a reason. You learned this stuff. You're working with Patrick, or you've plugged in some way. This is a big deal, guys, and you are here, and it is an honor to get to talk to you, because you're what makes this thing run. The world runs on volunteers. The world runs on you, and you're going to be prepared, and everybody else is just because of you. Now, here's some resources. And this will be all part of what Patrick's recording, but contact RYLAN. They're the ones that do the Map Your Neighborhood. Getting in touch with Neighborhood Watch and being the eyes and ears for your neighborhood is incredibly important. CERT is always important to me, you know, really the shining star. The up and coming shining star is the Neighborhood Teams program, which is really the evolution of CERT. And then 1st and 10th Tactical, if you're interested in learning how to handle weapons more properly. Outstanding. So with that, I think I am done, Patrick. So hopefully you're there. And
thank you, Janet. Can I get a round of applause for Janet? Well, everyone's muted.
Bravo!
Yeah, this is amazing. Wall of silent.
Yay! Oh, look at you guys. You're so nice.
Awesome.
That was outstanding. Thank you.